3 higher ed authors, 100 plus college and university presidents, dozens of actionable insights for academic leaders. Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education, is now available on Amazon. Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. Dr. Joe Salustio here again on another episode as we fast approach 600 episodes of this podcast just in a tad over 3 years, if you could believe it. 262,000 downloads as of yesterday when I looked. You continue to humble us every single day. And of course, always plug a quick thank you for those of you that have picked up Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education, a book that I co-wrote with Kate Colbert. Contributions by Elvin Freitas, who of course is the co-founder of this podcast, where we took our first 125 presidents that we interviewed and all their insights, and we put them into a book that probably is the best $32 per person you'll ever spend on professional development, because there are so many innovations that are within that book and thoughts. And we appreciate you for humbling us and purchasing one, and of course leave us an Amazon review if you will. And I do want to give a quick shout out to one of my good friends. You know her if you've been on LinkedIn. Her name's Beth Kiernan Ferrigno, and she does a lot with knowledge management and the right ed tech tools for your needs. She always asks the question, if you're paying too much for your tech than you're using. The ed tech audit looks back at your actual usage to create a plan for future purchases and making sure you get the ROI for your technology. Ed tech implementation planning improves your ed tech adoption rates with a strategic approach to implementation. Building on change management strategies will identify what is working for you and devise an implementation plan that builds on your existing success. You can reach Beth Ferrigno. She's CEO of Innovative Instructional Solution, and it's Beth at innovativeinstruction.com if you want to take a look at what she does in terms of knowledge management. And she's a great friend to the podcast. Let's get to our episode today. I'm going to bring in my co-host. He comes with and I mean the single longest title in the history of higher education, ladies and gentlemen. He's Douglas Carlton, Head of Business Development, Partnerships, and Strategy for North America at Lead Square. Douglas, nobody can beat that.
I'm sure someone has a longer title out there, but it's a mouthful. So thanks for nailing it.
If they exist, and definitely not on this phone call. So we're gonna have to end this phone call. You hear that? This phone call? I'm literally doing a podcast with 2 guests, and I called it a phone call. I don't know if that's an insult or just me transitioning from my day job to the podcast, and I was on the phone and now I'm anyway. That's what's going on in my head right now. If anybody goes, what's going on in your head when you record? That's literally the noise happening in my head. Nobody wants to hear about that. What you do want to hear about is what's going on at the institution, and I have 2 guests to tell us what's happening. Here's the first. He is Mike Reeser. He's Chancellor and CEO of the Texas State Technical College. Mike, what's up?
Hey, it's good to be with you, Joe and Douglas. Thanks for inviting us. We look forward to the time together.
Well, there's only one thing that can make a Mike better, Mike, and that's a Michael. Here comes Michael Bettersworth, and he is Chief Innovation Officer at Texas State Technical College.
Well, nice to be here, Joe. One of the things that we do at the college here is we like to change titles quite a bit. So that was true a few months ago, but now you're talking to the Chief Marketing Officer at TSTC.
How do you like that? Chief Marketing? Well, you know what? Innovation and marketing have to go together, don't they? So that's kind of smart.
They do.
I like that. Well, I'm going to go to Mike first. Mike, level set for us as we like to do on this podcast. Tell us about the Texas State Technical College. What do you do? How do you do it?
So Texas State Technical College is a system of public institutions that was chartered by the state of Texas back in the 1960s. We are the 2-year technical college system. Our mission is to deliver at we'll call it the top of the market in terms of skilled technicians that are needed in high demand, high tech, or critical needs situations across the workforce in Texas.
You know, this is perfect, right? Because we're having this, Mike, conversation over skills versus degree. Is it one or the other? And I ask this of so many guests, but it's like the most important question we're dealing with right now. Students and today's students are looking for almost something tangible. Like, I can walk away from my education with X, and if I decide to go and get a degree later, that's the Y, but I need the X. Is that what your students are telling you? Like they're coming in going, I need the skill, I want to work. They're not going straight into a 4-year.
The answer is yes and no. I will tell you that the employers that we target as we train are definitely talking to us at the level of skills. And they do that because we make a point of engaging them in the dialogue from a skill standpoint. Then when we turn around and interact with the students who aspire to those particular jobs, we tend to talk in a kind of a bulked up level. Our students talk to us about long-term prosperous employment, and so they're talking about jobs more often.
Michael, over to you real fast, and then I'll hand it to you, Douglas. Marketing. What do students want? What's attracting them to, I don't know, to Texas State Technical College?
Sure.
To the, is it fast path to the workforce? Is it awareness going, hey, look, you can get a skill? Do they know? Do students know generally what they want? Are you convincing them along the way? Give us kind of the state of marketing to the skills pathways.
But predominantly for our students, it's a job. And that's most students, actually. There's a long-term survey of incoming freshmen where they're asked, why did you enroll in this institution? And it's been going on for decades. And to get a job is always at the top of that list. The other one is, that's right. That's right. So yeah, now when we talk about students, there's a lot of different kinds of students, and we're all students, and we have different motivations at different times of our lives. And so that's true for our student population more than most. Community colleges have such a diverse student population. They have different needs, but there is a shared common need across all of our student body, and that's they're coming here to pick up skills to get a job, to improve their income potential. There's certainly an interest, a passion, but the first and foremost is typically about income. And they're not apologetic. I talk to a lot of students whenever I'm walking around our campuses, and I ask them, why are you here? And there is always in healthcare a motivation to help people. There's a motivation for the line worker, knowing that they restored power to a hospital. But also at the top of that is they're looking at the earnings potentials for the return on their investment.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with working for the My Left Pocket Foundation, right? I mean, a lot of students are, that's okay. And sometimes in the past, you would think when you ask a student, why are you here? And you're looking for this nice, esoteric kind of answer of changing the world. And it went that way for a little while. But now, as COVID disrupts everything, now it's changed the world, but I need to make money when I do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and those aren't mutually exclusive, right? And so there's you want to have purpose, you want to have meaning, you want to be contributing, but at the same time, you need to have a level of comfort. And this generation is the first in a long time that is earning less than their parents. So we have a generation of students that is much more attuned to to these foundational needs about earnings. You can't assume that just more education will equal and correlate with higher earnings anymore. Those correlations are very dicey, particularly based on the field of study. It wasn't always that way. More education had a stronger correlation with higher earnings, but now it's very spiky depending on what you study, and students are aware of that.
Should we pass it over to Douglas, or see how much he's going to be chomping in the bit if I keep asking questions?
I know.
Your turn.
I always really appreciate you letting me jump in early. So you have a lot of really interesting programs, but one that always sort of catches attention is exciting is the aviation side of things. So I saw you aircraft pilot training and talk about median salaries. Whew, that's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
And also power plant technology and avionics. So I'm curious, one of the big news, and I'm a big flying fan, United just opened up their flight training center and is in the process of ramping it up in Texas. Is that overlapping with you, or is there just so much demand for pilots and avionics technicians, et cetera, that the world is so open that you don't even think about it?
Well, I can tell you that all of the forecasters who are looking at pilots, particularly on the commercial side, will tell you there is a crisis headed our way in terms of a shortage of talent. And the president of one of the major carriers in a congressional testimony a few years ago said at the current trajectory, it won't be long before pilots are making $1 million a year because the shortage will be that severe.
Captain speaking.
And as we know, the regulations require a mandatory retirement out of commercial aviation at age 65. And the military is not mustering out an adequate number of pilots. And so students are realizing that there is really lucrative opportunities in commercial aviation. So too in private aviation, because the incidence of privately owned jet aircraft and other transportation means continues to grow, and there are real benefits to being a private pilot in a sector like that. So that's a really lucrative field.
Let me expand on that a little bit. So we have pilot training and aircraft maintenance, airframe power plant, and avionics. Avionics is a rare one. We used to have more. We used to train aircraft dispatchers, and I think very appropriate for our conversation today, given recent accidents that are happening in the aviation industry, is that some of the regulations were changed around training dispatchers. We used to have a dispatch training program with fully automated towers. We could load any tower in the world, simulate any weather condition, voice controlled. And we shut that entire program down because the FAA said they no longer would require that for entry into aircraft dispatch. They're having such shortages in that area as well that we've actually effectively lowered some of the standards for that. And I think it's maybe an indication of what we're seeing happening in our skies today.
Yeah, that's a really compelling point. So thank you for bringing that up, because it's, how do you solve the problem? It sounds like getting rid of some of the requirements is, given everything the news, probably not the right way to do it.
Well, on to that point, the next thing that's been floated is to reduce the number of pilots required in a cockpit from 2 to 1.
Well, that's the insanity.
The skill shortages are so bad in some of these areas. That's the links that we're being drawn to, and there are going to be some repercussions, not just financially, but also in our ability to function. And one of the major issues, going back to the marketing side, is that our biggest challenge is not technology, knowing what to teach, having employers. It's student interest in some of these critical fields. And our ability to increase the interest in pursuing these is really the biggest challenge that we face. There are folks around the country that are getting key to that and working on it more. We're hopeful about that, but it's we alone as one institution or as separate colleges can't address these larger cultural disconnects between these career opportunities and then the training providers. There's a real gap. That's the gap. It's not a skills gap in terms of what to teach. It's a skills gap in student interest.
Yeah, that's a really compelling point.
Yeah.
Are sort of kind of following on that, like one of the big pieces of data come out the last year for community colleges, which I suspect there's some overlap between potential students there, is double-digit declines in both enrollment and retention. So community colleges, kind of students are coming out of that. Is that potentially landing with you? Like what do your enrollments look like? Is there an overlap? Yeah, please say more.
So I can tell you, we didn't have as much, we didn't suffer melt at the rate that the typical community college did.
Okay.
And I like to, when I dived into that, I found that there were a few factors going on. The first is community colleges by their nature have a very broad mission. And transfer is part of it, community enrichment and self-enrichment is part of it. Classic academic credentials is another part of it, workforce training. And because of that, community colleges have some students who are in a self-discovery mode. They may be fragile from the standpoint of a challenging life situation that was exacerbated by the pandemic. And so you have a whole different student body at a community college than you do at a technical school like ours. The students who arrive at our door have a particular outcome in mind when they arrive. And there's a particular profession they want to work in, and they know that this college pathway is a means to that end. And so there's a bit of determination in the students that come here, and we don't have a lot of students who are in a self-discovery mode. Those fragile and self-discovery students are at a bulk of those who melted away from the two-year sector during the pandemic. And the ones who had a clear vision when they arrived had just an enhanced level of grit, if you will, and were able to persevere through the pandemic at bigger numbers. And that's how I would attribute our success vis-a-vis the rest of the sector during the pandemic.
You know, messaging is a really important part of this too. And you think back to those days and you wonder if a student, it was harder for them, was retention better because their education needed to be hands-on, because they would be giving it up almost entirely. They couldn't shift to online. And the reason I bring that up is because, and Michael, I'm going to go to you with this, life is hands-on. Your education should be too. I got that right off your website. That's a differentiating statement. It's a value proposition. It's intentional. It's selling against an online experience in a way, right? Where if you're gonna, okay, so I can't remember who it was. We had a guest said they had some aviation training, and they said, if you're gonna fly a plane, I don't want you to learn online. I want you to learn in a cockpit or fixing it, while you're there fixing the plane. Talk about that. Life is hands-on. Your education should be too, as a differentiator, and why that's important.
The pandemic taught us that the hopes of online education should be tempered with some expectations. High school students were thrown online, and the quality, even if it was good, people were social creatures, and certain people will learn well with self-direction online, but the majority prefer cohorts. They prefer to team. And this is proven out through this pandemic. We shifted a massive amount of our material online, and we are moving a lot of it back. We're moving it back more smartly. We'll keep some online, but even moving where we have the option of a lecture and some online. Let me tell you the other big loss that we realized: faculty. A faculty standing in front of a classroom of people can sense when a student is struggling, and they can do a small intervention in that moment, non-verbally even maybe, and catch a person who's struggling. That online, we had to move faculty to tutor students online. We had to do a huge opportunity cost of moving faculty to become tutorers. That hurts our recruiting. That hurts all kinds of other things. So I really think the pandemic taught us to temper our expectations about online and to recognize the human nature and the value of that face-to-face experience. That's a big component of this. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I wanted to build on that. I love Michael's answer, and I wanted to do it. And also, if I could, to that, and that is a big differentiator between a technical college like ours and many other institutions is that knowledge is critical and common to all of us. That's what we arrive at college for, is to gain knowledge. But at a technical school, there's an added component, and that is craftsmanship.
Yes.
You have to be able to do the skill that we are training for in order to be valuable to an employer in the workplace. And we haven't found a way to teach how to run a welding bead across an alloy online. We haven't found a way to get someone to program a CNC machine online and then ensure that the cutting oil and the machine is, the feed rate on the machine is properly set for it to go until you're actually got a bit on a piece of steel. And that kind of craftsmanship is really what the employers buy. You can't do it online.
Yeah.
You have to do it hands-on.
Yeah. Mike, to you this time first, this money back guarantee, First of all, what a business term. What's that business term of money back guarantee? You don't typically see that anywhere in higher education. And it's there very intentionally. I read a lot about it, and I can see why that is so important to a student, right? Because when you buy a product or service, typically you have an opportunity to get something back if it doesn't meet your expectations, and higher ed is not one of those industries. Typically that doesn't exist. And tell us what that means. What does it mean when you say at Texas State Tech College that we don't get paid unless you're working? What does it mean? What is this money back guarantee? Take it in any way you want it.
So there's actually two parts that you touched on. The first is the way in which we earn our public funding, but the money back guarantee, the genesis of that came when we were brainstorming the challenge that we discovered by studying the students who were coming to us. Many of the students come from modest households. They may come from situations in which both of their parents are working in hourly professions. And the idea of going to college is a big financial risk. Whether they have to borrow money or whether Pell Grant pays for it or likewise, they have a choice between going to work in a manner similar to their parents or to heading to college in an attempt to get onto the upward swinging on-ramp of prosperity. And so when we realized that there were families sitting at the kitchen table wondering, should we take this risk? We imagined how it is we could take the risk out of the calculation. We knew what they wanted was a job, that college was the means to the end. And we have a whole handful of programs that are almost certain to get you a great paying job. So we thought, let's take the risk off the student and we'll bear it at the institution level because we have 50 years of track record that prove to us that we're going to get you into a fabulous employment situation. That's been in place now for 5-6 years. We've never had to issue a refund.
Epic. You know that the world of higher education is experiencing evolutions and revolutions. You want to be part of the progress. Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education with insights from more than 100 college and university presidents, will show you how. Get your copy of Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education now on Amazon right away. We think you're going to love it. It's
amazing.
Love it.
And Mike,
go ahead,
I can
Michael.
let you know we're discussing this week. We only do that money back guarantee with a large number of programs, but not all. And somebody internally said, why aren't we if it's good enough for some programs that we have, why shouldn't we do it for all? And so we're actually looking at that, expanding that. Part of our, which Mike will get into, I'm sure, in a little bit, of our funding formula not forced us, but we consciously closed a large number of programs many years ago that the earnings were not as strong. The interest of students was there. They were profitable from a program contact hour perspective and cash flow perspective, but we shut them down because the earnings were not where we thought they needed to be. But now that we've cleaned our portfolio many years ago, and it's really solid, we're seriously considering, and Mike, I'm not making an announcement here, but expanding money back guarantee for all programs. We've had such success with this over the last 5 years, and our program quality continues to improve that we think we anticipate expansion of that. I haven't talked to you about that yet, boss. I hope you're okay with that.
You heard it here first.
I will teach you.
Douglas, over to you.
Yeah.
Well, if I could, Douglas, if you don't mind, the second half of your question had to do with our funding mechanism. And meaning we don't earn our money until the student does. Our public funding through the state of Texas is driven solely by whether our graduates go to work. And then the level of funding that we achieve is based on their first 5 years of earnings history.
Amazing.
So we're I haven't found another college that is funded this way. I like to characterize it this way. We're paid on a commission. And when the students achieve their ultimate goal of a great employment, our commission is based on how great their job is. And that, if you can imagine how that evolves the ethos of an organization in terms of its central focus on student success, post-graduation success, if you'll let yourself imagine that for a second, that's exactly what you'll find if you come to TSTC, is that kind of mindset.
By the way, and Douglas, before you go, there is an infrastructure that has to be created to do all of that, where a quote unquote normal college or whatever category they might be in may not be investing that amount of effort into the back end work, right? Of where'd they go? What are they earning? How do we track it? Where are they? Skip trace, Facebook. I've got to find them. I got to find out what kind of job they have. No Facebook. All right. But you get the point that you've got to stay in touch with a lot of people and collect a lot of data, or they stay in touch with you, Michael. Michael's shaking his head.
Mike's going yes, and I'm saying no. We don't do the data collection. The state of Texas does it because every state collects UI, unemployment, wage insurance records, okay, from employers, and that we capture about 70–80% of our sample population in that data. And that lets us know how much they're earning. Now, it's not 100%. We don't need to find 100% because we're doing is a sampling approach towards that model. There's much written about this. Social Finance did a wonderful book chapter that Mike wrote. What's the name of that book, Mike? I can't remember, but it's the methodology is there. Additionally, and most states have that data, by the way. Most states have linked their unemployment insurance data and the employment data. There's a wonderful report that just came out from the Florida and Perrin, and a company called Perrin, sponsored by Gates, that talks about this. I just came out. We'll get it to you, and the mechanisms for doing it. So there's popularity. Florida has implemented a similar model, and we talk to other states that call us, and sometimes we've even gone and testified to other legislatures to tell them how they can do this. It's not insurmountable. The biggest blocker to this is not the mechanism of it. It's that very few higher education institutions have a mission that is singularly focused on job placement. That's the big distinction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this system is, Michael, if I could build on that, this system is uniquely suited to TSTC because our mission is so narrow. Our mission is focus on the high demand, high tech, high need employment sectors in Texas and train the skills needed for Texans to get those jobs. And if that's all you have to do, then a funding formula that's based on that success is applicable to us. In other institutions, there are scholarly goals and there are, cultural enrichment, and there's other missions that institutions fulfill. And the earnings of their graduates wouldn't be a good indicator of success in areas like that. So the key point is, what is the success you're trying to achieve? And then tie your funding to that success. Mm-hmm. And in that way, outcomes-based funding could be applicable to a lot of institutions.
Fantastic.
Douglas, one more for me before you go. No, I'm just kidding, buddy. It's your turn now.
No, I think that's an absolutely brilliant point as far as align your funding to your desired goal and outcome. And it sounds like you've done an absolutely fabulous job of that. And I'm curious, when you're thinking about, like, obviously that's in your forefront of your mind. So when you're thinking about growing and adding programs, and I know there's sort of like this always push to grow in education, how do you think about growth in that context? And perhaps do you think about adding a new campus? Do you think about adding a new program? Just really curious to get your insights sort of given that lens.
Well, let me offer a short answer, and then I'll turn it over to Michael, who will have a really good explanation. The short answer is we're driven by the market.
Okay.
We study the market and we respond. And Michael will tell you more about it if you'd like, because he built the tool that allows us to do that.
I mean, that's pretty much it. We can get into nuances, but I think that's it. There's two, I don't want to use the customer word, Mike, because we're not going on that. When we look at the market, who are you looking at is the question, because let's define that. When Mike says we're looking at the market, we're not looking at student interest and determining what programs we can sell to students. That's the market that many people think about in higher education when you say, quote, the market. What we mean by the market are the employers, and not just the employers, but the workforce needs, which could be an independent contractor. It could be somebody starting their own business, right? It's not just employers. It's what are the labor market needs? And specifically, we're focusing on Texas, which is 9th largest economy in the world, massive amounts of population growth. Part of the reason we haven't had an enrollment dip also, by the way, although many of the Texas colleges have, we have an influx of people coming to the state and companies coming to the state that is creating both new student interest and huge market demand. But we have to keep a pace on that. There are certain bread and butter staples. We have welding at all of our locations. We have lots of some machining. We have health. Then our charge and mission is to focus on new and emerging. Also, things that are really expensive, guys. The margins are not great, but we have an obligation from a competitive standpoint of the state to ensure that the employers that are here have the workforce they need to be competitive. So that's the market that Mike's talking about that we listen to. And it's more than 1,000 industry advisors, regular engagements, a lot of relationship management with the hiring managers and employers that we listen to. They're not perfunctory. They're not compliance activities. They are our driver of our offerings.
That's really, I love the short answer and the long answer, because it's exactly the way it should be. And I love also the explanation of who the market is, right? Because it does make a difference. Like, just because you say a student says, I want X, doesn't mean it actually is necessary for the economy. And especially with a job-driven, mandate for you guys, you can't think that way. So that makes all the sense in the world. Maybe without giving too much away, is there a area or a program that you've been hearing that needs to exist that doesn't? Is there a sector you're going into? Just really curious. I saw kind of twinkle in your eye. I think you probably have an answer. I don't know if you can tell me that.
So my role for about 13 years here was forecasting emerging occupations and technologies, and we've done a lot of work in data and analytics around that. We created a group called Skills Engine. Skills Engine is a division of the college that we launched in order to better understand skill requirements, because it's very difficult to do, frankly, Douglas. The labor market information data is incomplete. ONET's wonderful, but we have more than 800 occupations. And then there's companies that are selling data aggregation companies using job posting data to try to inform the labor market, which you can't really do at a detailed level. This is scraping job ads, help wanted signs. These aren't competency profiles. So that's a noisy, an incomplete signal. At the moment, most of the change in our curriculum is not in new programs, but it's actually inside the existing programs, making certain that the programs are, for example, let's talk about drones or unmanned aerial systems. We're not going to do a drone pilot training program, maybe for non-credit, for the FAA requirement, but we do infuse drones in programs like environmental safety, in law enforcement, or in the variety of different fields where the technology and the competencies and the knowledge, skills, and abilities become applicable. That's where the majority of change happens. It's not new occupations, it's existing occupations where the majority of the change happens. And lastly, finding out what to start teaching is not that hard. It's not easy, but the more difficult thing is to find out what to stop teaching. Once you have a degree program and you put a course in it, and I can give you many examples of this, that course is its own existence, its own, people like that, it's sunk cost. So the bigger challenge is making certain that you're stopping, that you're removing a 1-week lesson that you no longer need, that's been there for years, that you've invested a lot of money into that great PowerPoint slide, okay? But it's not that is the bulk of the work, making certain you're culling things that may not be as relevant. Foundational knowledge will always be there. AC, DC electronics is all over our place. There's some fundamentals of physics that are probably not changing anytime soon, although who knows. Those will always endure. But on the edges where we have to always keep an eye out, because we have a limited amount of time to get this person the competencies and skills that they need to be successful. And so wasting their time teaching something that's not relevant or foundational is akin to fraud.
Agreed. Given that you're selling them something they don't need.
Right.
Yeah. Let me add to what Michael said. What Michael was talking about was the notion that often new systems don't warrant an entire standalone program because they often don't launch an army of technical technician needs instantly. Instead, they infiltrate existing jobs. And so rightfully at the college level, they should be integrated in measured ways into existing pathways.
Yeah.
But there's another thing I'll add too, and that is if you were to consider that, 50 years ago, manufacturing was the sort of thing that was highly manual in nature. And today we have advanced manufacturing that is integrated, robotics and optical systems and feedback electronics and logic control systems. These are just integrations of existing technologies. They're mashups, if you will, of existing technologies in novel new ways that impact the market as an innovation.
OpenAI, ChatGPT, right?
There we go.
That goes into a host of different programs as a new tool to use. We're not going to do a degree program in that necessarily. I mean, we're going to infuse that new technology or capability into these areas. That's the more common. Sure, we'll have whole new programs, but we really want to be careful about that at the degree and certificate level. At the non-credit level, lots of volatility, right. Bitcoin engineers or whatever it might be, those are where you have less investment of the person, time. There's a little more volatility. We don't want to have degree programs that are hyper specialized, overly specialized. I mean, precision machining is specialized, but it's enduring. It lasts. Yeah. So you don't want to get too creative with fancy degree names, because that piece of paper's value in 10 years may be worth less if it's just a fad. So we got to be careful when and you'll see this at some colleges, where they'll be really quick to market with a new degree in something that's hot. And that's a fad. That person's paper in 10 years is going to be worth less. That's not good. So we try to look at the investment of the paper and what it's going to be for its long-term value with the fiduciary interest of our students.
100%.
And I love that. I think my guess is the answer, and you'll tell me if I had this wrong or not, but because of your laser focus on what your goal is, what your funding mechanism, that highly incentivizes you to make sure, and forgive me for calling it a product, but like the educational piece, if it's a product, you're making sure it's valuable and not a commodity and not a fad, because that is ultimately what drives the entire flywheel for you.
That's our goal. We're imperfect at times, because judging the market and its relevance is dynamic, but that's our intent. Sometimes something majorly disruptive comes along, and like the FAA changing the requirements for us to train dispatchers, that goes away. And now our program is tens of millions of dollars of equipment and things, we know. So we have to, but our intention is to have that at heart.
Yeah, Michael's referring indirectly to the notion of scale. Technology is done best at scale. Doing it's really hard to do something like a robotics program with just one robot, because robots come in the diversity of robots is too great. And so what we often do is we do the infusion into existing pathways, which is what we've talked about, when technologies are emerging and when they've just hit the marketplace. And we're following the job market. And as the job market starts to scale, so do we. Yeah. And that's the point at which we take our training from a quick, let's call it acute and tactical nature, to strategic, long-term, industrial scaled nature. And it's a matter of growing with the market.
Mhm.
And you can't be too out in front, otherwise you may adopt Betamax and not VHS. So
Boo, Betamax was so much better. Come on.
Level up.
Great example.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, gents, we could probably go on. I know we could go on forever because we just scratched the surface on what this conversation can be. But we do have two final questions for every guest. I'm going to give you guys the two questions, and you got to tell me which one of you is going to answer what. All right. So the first, and probably really easy one: what did we not say about Texas State Technical College that needs to be said? Anything that you guys have going on? Any release of new programs? Any, I don't know, you want to love on your employees for a couple of minutes. You get 2 minutes, however long you want to actually. Say anything you want about Texas State Technical College. And the other one, what does the future of higher education look like? Volunteers.
Ooh, we want both of those. Mike,
Okay,
your
both.
discretion,
Go.
sir.
Go.
Your discretion.
No,
You convinced me. Just go back and forth and answer both.
So I'll take a risk with my colleagues in the sector by suggesting that higher ed has a lot of changing to go through. That the foundational assumptions that created our, let's call it an industry, cannot be expected to endure forever. The cost of education has gotten so extraordinarily large, and the connection between a college degree and a prosperous economic future has been shaken. The correlation isn't there the way it used to be for a lot of pathways through education. So if it's costing an extraordinary amount of money and the return in terms of professional prosperity is now shaky, that means the foundational assumptions we're using to field what we do and to suggest to students that this is a good way to go, I think is broken. It's iffy. And we've seen institutions who have acknowledged, in addition to scholarship and academic rigor, we're going to include employability as one of our desired outcomes. The institutions who have done that are going to be the successors as these changes occur, because that one added bit aligns their efforts with the intentions of the student who came to them in the first place. It is the student's intention to have economic prosperity. And if schools don't admit that's part of what I'm going to provide to them, then I think they're going to cling to a dying business model.
Nailed it.
All right, Michael.
Building on that, and then I'll go to the announcement kind of thing. There's a group, Workforce Talent Educators Association, that we're affiliated with, that believes in the same thing Michael just said. This is a group that's working on creating a new national accreditor. That Jennifer Diermeyer is a PhD economics professor who was tenured, left her tenured role to start this organization because she believes in those same principles as well. I highly recommend including her in your podcast in the future. The thing to surprise, an announcement to make about this, I think where we're building $300 million in new campuses around the state of Texas, and there's some interesting bills floating around in the legislature right now. So we're hiring. So people that are listening to this in this space that are resonating with these concepts, that are looking for career advancement, please look us up. And if we don't have a posting that's there, reach out to us anyway. If the mission and purpose of what we're talking about resonates with you and you have skills to bring, we'd love to talk to you, because we're growing. And the state's growing, our student body's growing. But the thing that I really want to mention is the success of that. The funding formula created a culture that Mike was talking about that unified everyone's purpose. And those that rallied behind it, that we really have to thank, are our faculty, because our faculty rallied to placement and earnings, and the success of our students is directly correlated with their attention to quality and their relationships with industry. And it is so heartwarming to see how a group of people can rally around a cause. And it is just, we all work to get out of the way and enable those people to do their jobs. We have a great debt to them.
That is amazing. Well said. And wow, what a powerful episode, Douglas. I'm glad you were here with me. Of course, you know him, you love him. He's Douglas Carlson. He's head of business development and partnership strategy for North America at Lead Squared. Douglas, what do you think of this conversation?
Oh, this is incredible. The model, the alignment, it's, I'm sure someone else is doing it, but I sure haven't heard of it. So just like, well done. And we need more of this type of model.
Well, ladies and gents, let me outro my guest here. Here he is first. He's the chief marketing innovator. He does all of it, ladies and gentlemen. He's Michael Bettersworth. He's got a lot to say from Texas State Technical College. Very well-spoken gentleman, and appreciate all you had to say, Michael. Hope you had a good time here on the podcast.
Thank you for the time today. Appreciate it. We're look forward to listening to 600th episode coming up anytime.
You can get started with the first 125 by buying the book. No, I won't. I won't do that. I won't do that. Gratuitous self-promotion. How dare I? But if you do want to go buy the book to everyone, you could, if you want. If you want. Anyway, my other guest, he is Chancellor and CEO of Texas State Tech College. He is Mike Reeser. Mike, we hope you had a good time today.
Thank you, Joe. It was an honor to be here, and I hope everyone buys your book.
Well, thank you, sir. The honor truly is ours. We love bringing innovators to the microphone here. This is what this podcast is really all about. It's about who's doing it right, and how are they doing it when we should be doing it, and how can we do it? And I think for anybody that's really looking to make the direct correlation between education and jobs should give Mike or Michael a call because they seem to be doing a pretty darn good job of it. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd. It's time to level up. The beginning of a new era in higher education begins with you. Order your copy of Commencement, The Beginning of a New Era in Higher Education by Kate Colbert, Dr. Joe Salustio, with contributions by Elvin Freitas. It's higher education's must-read book of 2022. Discover how you can seize the moment to change higher education forever. Commencement, The Beginning of a New Era in Higher Education, now available on Amazon. For bulk orders, contact Kate, Joe, or Elvin